Beast of Reincarnation is almost here, with its release scheduled for August 4th, 2026. One of the biggest surprises for me is that it's coming from Game Freak. If you followed the studio for a while, you probably know them almost entirely for Pokémon. So seeing them work on a dark action RPG like this definitely wasn't something I expected. Ever since the game was revealed, I've gone back and watched the gameplay trailers a few times, and the combat is what keeps catching my attention. The first thing that came to mind was Sekiro. Not because I think Beast of Reincarnation is trying to copy it, and I'm definitely not saying it'll feel the same, but because of how much the gameplay appears to emphasize timing. From what Game Freak has shown so far, it looks like you're encouraged to stand your ground, read enemy attacks, and look for the right moment to parry instead of relying on dodging everything. That's probably why it stood out to me. I've always enjoyed games where a well-timed parry feels just as important as landing your attacks. It makes every fight feel more engaging because you're constantly reacting to what the enemy is doing instead of waiting for an opening. It also looks like those parries tie into the rest of the combat system. Based on the gameplay they've shown, successful parries build the resource you use to command Ku, your canine companion. Those commands can then lead into stronger abilities like Bloom Arts, so it looks like playing well on defense directly feeds into your offense. Ku also doesn't seem like the usual AI companion that just follows you around and attacks whenever it wants. From what we've seen, you're actively choosing when to use Ku's abilities, and when you open the command menu, time slows down instead of stopping completely. I like that because it looks like it gives you a moment to think without completely killing the pace of the fight. Another reason this game has me interested is because it's something completely different for Game Freak. Their last original game outside the Pokémon series was Little Town Hero, which launched in 2019. By the time Beast of Reincarnation releases, it'll have been about 7 years since then. That's a pretty long gap between original projects, so it's interesting to see what they've been working on outside of Pokémon. As for the story, Game Freak is still keeping a lot of details to themselves, which I actually don't mind. What we know so far is that the game takes place in the year 4026 in a post-apocalyptic Japan. You play as Emma, a blighted one, who travels alongside her canine companion, Ku, through a world that's been consumed by corruption. Along the journey, you'll fight powerful creatures known as Nushi, gain new abilities from defeating them, and continue searching for the mysterious Beast of Reincarnation. Personally, I don't need to know much more than that before launch. I'd rather experience the story myself than have every major plot point revealed in trailers. The one thing I'm still keeping an eye on is performance. As promising as the game looks, Game Freak hasn't exactly been known for releasing the most technically polished games. Performance and optimization have been common criticisms of some of their recent titles, so I think it's fair to have a few questions going into this one. Beast of Reincarnation also looks much more ambitious than what the studio has done before. The larger environments, more realistic visuals, and faster-paced combat all make me wonder how well it'll run when the full game is finally in players' hands. Hopefully this ends up being the game that changes that conversation, because I'd really like to see Game Freak succeed with a new IP. Right now, I'd say I'm cautiously optimistic. The combat has definitely sold me on keeping an eye on it, but I'm still waiting to see how everything comes together at launch. What about you guys? Has Beast of Reincarnation caught your attention, or are you still waiting to see more before deciding? And if you've been following the game, what's the first thing that stood out to you? Was it the combat, the setting, or maybe something else entirely? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. It'll be interesting to come back to this conversation after the game launches and see how close our first impressions were.